We begin this hour with President Trump now threatening possible military action against Iran as protesters there break out over the country's worsening economic conditions. Thousands of people took to the streets after the value of Iran's currency fell to a record low on Sunday. At least 7 people have been killed so far in the unrest. The president wrote in part on Truth Social today, quote, "If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go." CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand joins me now with more on this story. Natalie, how is the Iranian government responding and reacting to President Trump's comments?
Yeah, Iranian officials are making threats of their own. The parliament speaker indicating that U.S. bases and forces could be legitimate targets if the U.S. were to take action. Another official writing on X that U.S. interference in this, quote, internal matter would mean destabilizing the entire region and destroying America's interests. This follows that social media post by the president overnight in which he said that essentially he would intervene or could potentially intervene on behalf of the protesters if peaceful protesters are violently killed. We have reached out to the White House to get more clarification about what that could potentially look like. We have not heard back, Chanel, as of yet.
So, Natalie, remind us again how we got here. I mean, what has President Trump's posture been with Iran since he took office? And how do these latest threats sort of fit into that bigger picture?
Yeah, as we know, Chanel, the president has not been shy about making threats or even taking action. If you think back to last June's targeted strikes on key nuclear facilities. Just a few days ago, back on Monday, President Trump issued another warning for Iran, saying that there would be major consequences if Iran were to rebuild its nuclear program, indicating that there were unconfirmed reports of that. And then we have this latest post, again, the president speaking on behalf of protesters. I spoke to one Iran expert who said that that post really should not be underestimated. He believes that it could actually embolden the protesters or the demonstrators, causing this latest movement, street movement in Iran, to potentially last longer. Here's part of my conversation with Alex Vatanka of the Middle East Institute. Take a listen.
Do you think these protests, could this be a tipping point?
So this Iranian regime has been around since 1979. And pretty much from get-go, they have faced popular unrest. If you have defections, that's really the critical moment in terms of domestic dynamics. That could be the critical moment where people sort of leave the regime, say this is a lost cause. And I suspect in many ways that's what President Trump is hoping for.
And Vatanka told me in recent years, street-level movements like this, mass demonstrations, have tended to die down after a few days or weeks. So the question now, Chanel, is how long will this one last?
All right, Natalie Brand, thank you. Also want to bring in Roya Hakakian. She's a fellow at Yale University's Davenport College and author of Journey from the Land of No, a Girlhood Caught in Revolutionary Iran. Good to see you, Roya. So how do you see these threats from President Trump sort of impacting the situation in Iran? How does Israel also factor into all of this?
I think by far this is the most important and potentially significant message that a U.S. president has ever delivered to the people of Iran. Unlike the situation in Syria more than a year ago, Iranians are peaceful protesters. They are not armed. There are no underground groups with weaponry that can come and fight the regime that's really armed to the hilt. And so for the people to get the reassurance that there will be backing by the United States, by international forces, against another mass slaughter of them, as we saw back in 2022, is hugely significant. And I think this is coming on the heels of the 12-day war back in June. And the Iranian regime has never been as weak as it is right now.
So do you think, Roya, that this public outcry and that we're seeing right now that Natalie was also talking about can actually lead to any meaningful change in Iran? I mean, how long do you think it'll last?
In the past, the most important and widespread round of protests that we saw was in 2022 after the killing of a Kurdish girl named Mahsa Amini on the streets of Iran that brought thousands of students and other protesters to the streets. After the demonstrators showed up, within about a week, the regime arrested nearly 20,000 protesters and later on killed hundreds of them. And, the tortures and all those other things that happened to the prisoners go unreported. This time around, there is a major difference. One is that the war between Iran, Israel, and the United States has happened. Europe has stood against Iran with its own sanctions more resolutely than it ever has. And there has been a certain loss of morale from within the regime, from its own constituents, that I think can potentially lead these protests to have a very different ending than all the other ones we've seen in the past.
Okay, a very fluid situation. Roya, we appreciate your time and insight on this. Thank you.
Thank you.